Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be unpacking a role that you might not have heard of before. It's the Advocate General of a state in India.
Yeah, it's one of those positions that's really crucial to how the government functions, but most people don't even know it exists. It's like a behind the scenes power player.
Exactly, and that's why we're diving into it today, whether you're, thinking about a career in law or policy or just want to understand how things work. This deep dive is going to give you a much clearer picture.
And what's really cool is we're going to be using actual legal text to break it all down. So we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of the Advocate General's powers, responsibilities, all that good stuff.
So basically, we're taking you straight to the source material.
Yeah.
No fluff, just the facts.
Right to the heart of it.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is an advocate general? I mean, what do they do?
Well, think of it this way. The Advocate General is like the state's very own legal eagle. They're the top legal advisor to the state government. Their job is to make sure everything the government does is by the book, legally speaking, of course.
So not just a rubber stamp,
Yeah,
but someone who really makes sure the government doesn't stray outside the lines of the law.
exactly. They're a safeguard, a check on power, and it's a position that demands a very high level of expertise. To even be considered for this role, you need the same qualifications as a high court judge.
Whoa, so we're talking 10 years of experience either as a judge or a high court advocate. That's serious legal firepower.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't a job for just anyone. It requires a deep understanding of the law and the judicial system. They need to be able to analyze complex legal issues and advise the government on how to navigate those challenges.
Okay, so we've established that the advocate general is a seriously qualified legal expert.
Yeah.
What about their term? How long do they actually serve in this position?
Well, that's where things get interesting. The term is at the pleasure of the governor, which might sound a bit vague at first.
Yeah, could you unpack that a bit for us?
Sure. Basically, it means they serve as long as the governor wants them to. However, in practice, the Advocate General usually resigns when a new government comes into power. So while there's no fixed term, there's definitely a connection to the political landscape.
So there's a political dimension to this role, even though it's fundamentally a legal position?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes it so fascinating, especially for those of you prepping for the UPSC exams. It's a perfect example of how law and politics are intertwined in Indian governance.
Okay, so we've got a highly qualified legal expert who serves at the pleasure of the governor and has to navigate the complexities of both law and politics. Sounds like a pretty demanding job.
It definitely is, but it's also a crucial one for ensuring the smooth functioning of the state government. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll get into the specifics of what they actually do on a daily basis.
Can't wait to hear more about that.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of the Advocate General.
All right, so we've covered the qualifications, the connection with the governor, and that fascinating mix of law and politics that comes with the job.
And of course, we dug into those constitutional articles that really lay the foundation for the Advocate General's powers and responsibilities. I mean, it's clear that the framers of the Constitution knew this role was going to be vital for upholding the law at the state level.
For sure. And I think one of the most interesting aspects is their position in the state legislature. They can participate in discussions, give their input, but they don't actually get to vote.
Right. It's such a deliberate design. It highlights that balance between offering legal counsel and making those political decisions. The Advocate General can bring all their legal expertise to the table, but they don't directly sway the outcome of those legislative debates.
So how does that actually play out in real-world situations? I mean, what are some specific examples of the Advocate General advising the government or representing the state's interests?
Okay, so let's say, for instance, a state government is considering a new policy, something with major legal implications, like maybe regulating online gaming or introducing a new tax system. The Advocate General would be the one to analyze that proposed legislation.
Making sure it fits within the Constitution, existing laws, judicial precedents, all of that.
Exactly. They're not just giving a simple yes or no. It's more like providing a detailed legal roadmap, pointing out potential roadblocks and suggesting ways to navigate those challenges.
So their advice could be pretty influential, right?
Oh, absolutely. They might recommend specific changes to the wording of a bill to avoid constitutional challenges, or even suggest completely different approaches that are more in line with legal principles.
Okay, so that's on the policy side. What about situations where the state government is in a legal battle, say with the central government or a neighboring state?
That's when the Advocate General really steps up as the state's main legal advocate. They put together the legal team, come up with the defense strategy, and represent the state's interests in court, even all the way up to the Supreme Court.
So they're going head-to-head with the best legal minds in the country.
You could say that. Their knowledge of constitutional law, legal precedent, all those nuances of the judicial system are so crucial in these situations. Their arguments, their legal strategies can really impact the outcome of these cases.
Makes you think of those intense courtroom dramas, but with real consequences for the state and its citizens.
Oh, for sure. Decisions made in these cases can impact everything. Environmental regulations, tax policies, even how resources are allocated. It's high-stakes stuff.
And for those UPSC aspirants out there, seeing how the Advocate General works in these real-world scenarios must be so valuable. It takes that textbook knowledge and makes it come alive.
Definitely. It's one thing to know the theory, but it's another to see how it actually plays out in those legal battles. These examples show how the Advocate General shapes policy, defends the state's interests, and upholds the rule of law.
You know, our source material also included this interesting table, listing various constitutional bodies like the Advocate General alongside the Election Commission and the Finance Commission.
Yeah, that's a great point. It really highlights how the Advocate General is a vital constitutional body. They're right up there with those other institutions that play such critical roles in our democracy.
It's like a reminder that this isn't just some lawyer tucked away in an office somewhere. They're a major player in how Indian governance is structured.
Exactly. And their role's becoming even more crucial now, with all these complex legal issues cropping up, from digital rights to climate change litigation. The Advocate General's expertise is more in demand than ever.
And this brings up something I wanted to emphasize. We've been focusing on the legal side, but we can't forget about the political dimensions of this role.
Right, right. We talked about how the Advocate General's term is at the pleasure of the governor, which ties them to the political landscape. That can lead to questions about their independence and potential conflicts of interest.
Others like walking a tightrope. They have to provide objective legal counsel while navigating those political realities.
Exactly. Balancing legal principles with political considerations, that's got to be a tough challenge.
And for those UPSC folks, that's a key point. Understanding the Advocate General goes way beyond memorizing articles and duties. It's about grasping that whole interplay between law, politics, and how the government actually functions.
Absolutely. It's analyzing real situations, spotting potential conflicts, and thinking critically about how the Advocate General can handle those challenges while keeping the legal system's integrity intact.
And this is relevant for all citizens, not just aspiring bureaucrats.
Oh, for sure. It helps us engage with our state government in a more informed way. We can ask better questions, hold our leaders accountable, and make sure the rule of law is actually being upheld in every aspect of governance.
So basically, understanding the Advocate General's role is like getting a behind-the-scenes look at how our state government operates.
Exactly. It gives you a deeper understanding of the legal and political forces at play. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll wrap things up by looking at some specific case studies that really bring this all to life.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've been unpacking the world of the Advocate General, covering everything from their impressive qualifications to their unique role in navigating those tricky intersections of law and politics.
And remember, we've stressed how crucial this role is, not just for those dreaming of a career in civil service, but for every single citizen who wants to grasp how their state government ticks.
Absolutely. But sometimes the best way to really get a handle on a concept is to see it in action. So let's jump into some specific case studies, some real-world scenarios that bring the Advocate General's role to life.
Love that idea. Okay, picture this. A state is facing a major public health crisis. Maybe a sudden outbreak of something contagious. The government wants to put strict measures in place, things like lockdowns and travel restrictions, to stop it from spreading.
Makes sense, but I can already see where this is going. Those kinds of measures, even though they might be necessary, can raise all sorts of legal questions about individual freedoms and how far the government can go.
Exactly. And that's precisely where the Advocate General comes in. They'd be the ones advising the government on the whole legal framework for those measures, making sure everything's proportionate, non-discriminatory, and doesn't step on those fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution.
So it's not just about giving the legal go-ahead, it's about actively shaping how those measures are put into practice, making sure there's a balance between keeping people safe and protecting their liberties.
You got it. They might suggest things like including sunset clauses for restrictions so they're not in place forever, or maybe pushing for more transparency in the decision-making process, or even setting up ways for people to seek redress if they feel their rights have been violated.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. It shows how the Advocate General isn't just reacting to a situation, they're actually shaping the legal response, even during a crisis.
Absolutely. It really highlights their critical role in upholding the rule of law, even when things are tough and decisions have to be made quickly.
Let's switch gears a bit. Imagine a state government planning a massive infrastructure project, like a huge dam or a new highway. Those kinds of things can often lead to worries about the environment and communities being displaced.
Perfect example. Here, the Advocate General would be super important in making sure the whole project fits within the relevant environmental laws and regulations. They'd be scrutinizing those environmental impact assessments, advising on how to acquire land properly, and making sure affected communities are treated fairly with proper compensation and help relocating.
So they're looking beyond just the legal technicalities. They're considering the wider social and environmental impact, too.
Right. They'd be flagging potential legal problems, suggesting ways to minimize environmental harm, and making sure the whole project aligns with those principles of sustainable development.
Which brings us back to that balancing act we talked about earlier. In this case, the Advocate General has to balance the state's development goals with the need to protect the environment and people's rights.
It's a complex task, that's for sure, and it takes more than just legal expertise. It requires a real sensitivity to social and environmental concerns.
And it reinforces why it's so important for us, as citizens, to understand the Advocate General's role. We can't just sit back and accept whatever the government decides. We need to understand the legal framework behind those decisions and hold our leaders accountable, making sure they're acting responsibly and staying within the bounds of the law.
Couldn't agree more. Knowing about the Advocate General empowers us to ask the right questions, participate in those important debates, and demand that transparency in how decisions are made.
I think we've really achieved what we set out to do with this deep dive. We've taken the mystery out of the Advocate General's role, exploring their powers, their responsibilities, and the kinds of challenges they face.
Yeah, we've seen how what they do affects every part of how the state government functions, from making policies to handling crises to protecting individual rights.
And most importantly, we've highlighted why this role is so essential for all citizens, no matter what their career goals are. It's about being informed, engaged, and having the power to shape a society that's fair and just.
So as you go about your day, whether you're studying for those exams or just chatting about what's going on in your state, remember the Advocate General, the one who safeguards the law, advises the government, and makes sure that the wheels of justice keep turning.
And on that note, we wrap up our exploration of the Advocate General. We hope you found it insightful and something to really think about. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep into the world around you.